Hello everybody. In this video, we're going to look at logic errors or logical errors. All right, let's get going. So to review the types of errors we've already seen, we've seen the syntax error. This comes when you're not following the rules or the syntax. It'll crash immediately and they are the easiest to spot. Why? Because you know there's an error because it crashes right away. The message will tell you what line it crashed at and the error location is usually pointed out to you with this caret. And then we've seen the runtime error, which looks like it might work, but then eventually it will crash. These are kind of medium in difficulty to solve. Here's a classic example of a runtime error. Here, in this case, we don't know what name is. And when it crashes, it tells me what line it is and what that error is. But unlike the syntax error, it does not give me a little caret to tell me exactly where the problem is. Right here is another classic runtime error when I'm trying to access an index that's out of range, it's out of the list. There is no 99999. The index only goes up to 4. So it'll start to run and then it'll crash, telling me what the line number is and what the particular runtime error is. The last type of error we're going to look at is the logic error or logical error. These happen because you've done the wrong thing in your code, but they're not going to crash your code. Because of that, they are by far and away the hardest type of error to find and debug. In a second, I'm going to go over some common logical errors that you'll see, but you may be wondering, Dr. Wu, why are we learning about all these errors? And the reason is our friends at the AP board decided when they changed the create task back in 2023 that they could potentially ask you about runtime errors. And if they could ask you about runtime errors, they could ask you about syntax errors and logical errors at the same time. So that gives these errors sort of an outsized impact on your AP score. But if that's the case, we need to learn how to identify them. So here are some examples of logic or logical errors. Now, logic and logical errors are by far the hardest ones to figure out, partly because it doesn't crash. And so what you end up having to do is look at your code very closely to see what's wrong, or you end up having to do lots and lots of prints to see what's wrong. So the first type of logic error I'm going to show is the off by 1 error. So, for example, here I'm going to repeat something 10 times, and my question is, does it go from 1 to 10 or 0 to 9? And if I'm wrong, my code's not going to work properly. And the answer is it prints from 0 to 9, which may or may not be intuitive. Another example might be with a Hogwarts lab. So, for example, here I have some houses. And this right here, with the rand int between 0 and len of houses minus 1, is going to give me a random number between 0 and 3, which would help me pick a random house. But it's very easy to screw up, and I've shown 3 ways here. And to really debug this problem, I'd have to run the code a lot of times, print out the number a lot of times, or else read the documentation for random.randint to figure out, why I was never getting Gryffindor or Ravenclaw. Very, very hard to spot this error, very, very hard to debug it. Next, I'll show 3 that are really common when people are making the biggest pumpkin or max function. So here's a correctly working biggest pumpkin function, basically a maximum function that finds the maximum in a list. But there are many ways to screw these kind of things up. So a very, very common one that also shows up when I'm making whiles is to mess up the Boolean expression. And if I run this, what I see is that it gives me a maximum of minus 9999, which is the original maximum I started with. So again, very, very hard to pick out. You end up doing stuff like this, making these big print statements to try to figure out what's the variable value and what do you expect at that point. In this example, I would expect that as I find the pumpkin of weight 1, that I would find a new maximum because it's bigger than minus 9999. I don't find a new maximum, so that leads me to look at this. So again, that's kind of hard. Another very common error is to mess up either variables or values. If this maximum should be a very, very low negative number, I could accidentally make it a very, very high negative number, in which case no new maximum would ever be found. I could accidentally return pumpkin. So again, this is the wrong variable. I could accidentally switch these two. This is a little bit less common of a mistake. But when I run these tests, I'll find that it doesn't look like it's working. And so again, how do I figure it out? I need to just look at the code and figure it out. That can be hard. So the other thing that we do is make these print statements. We know what we think the variable should be, what the value of that variable should be, and then we see if that variable is actually that value. So in this particular instance, I am finding a new maximum every time, but for some reason, the maximum is just totally wrong. And that leads me to sort of maybe think, oh, this might be my line. And these are things that truthfully can be hard to do, but you'll get better at it with experience. But maybe the most common logical error that we see is the indentation being wrong. So what do I mean? Well, I could have my indentation here or my indentation there. If I put my indentation here, here's what's going on. This loop right here should be looping over all of the items in the list. But what happens is when it hits the return right here, the return does two things. And the first thing that it does is it leaves the function. I'm out of here, man. So in this particular case, it will always return the first item as the maximum in the list. This again can be really hard to see, but these print statements can help me out. And what do I mean? I expect that it will print each item in the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I only see it print one of the items in the list. And how could that be? Well, the list iteration is being interrupted. And what's it being interrupted by? By the return. So again, these are very common mistakes. You for sure will make these kind of mistakes. I still make these mistakes sometimes. You just have to know to look out for them. Here are the solutions to the lab. All right, so what we have here are 5 logical errors, and we should try to figure them out. Again, with logical errors, your code's not going to crash, but at the same time, it's not going to work either. So they are the hardest to figure out. So let's just run it right now. And here's the run. Again, there's no crash. And we're going to have to try to figure out where the errors are. So these right here are functions. The code's not going to start to run there. The code's going to run in the main part of the code, which is right here. And that's an important concept. So here we go. Number is equal to 10. If number is greater than 0, prints out this is a negative number. Well, 10 is not a negative number. It should not print out this is a negative number. It should print out this is a positive number. So this right here is a very classic oops. A mistake in the Boolean expression. Numbers greater than 0 are positive, and numbers less than 0 are negative. So this is flipped. I'm going to flip it back so it's correct, and let's try to run it. And the first logical error is fixed. Let's look at the next one. Name equals Dwayne The Rock Johnson. This will print out the last 7 letters of Dwayne The Rock Johnson's last name. It prints out how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the logical error here is that it's printing out the last 6 characters instead of the last 7. It's not going to crash, but at the same time, it will not give me the right thing. So I will fix that right now. Let's try it. And here it's printing out the last 7 characters of Dwayne The Rock Johnson's last name. And my second error is fixed. 3, 4, and 5 have to do with this list. And they go over very classic mistakes that people have with functions. So let's look at that right now. And we'll look at what's next up in the code. The first maximum is maximum 1. It's calling the function maximum 1. And it's sending in numbers as an argument. And it looks like it's trying to find the maximum number in this list. So we expect this to come back with 19, but instead it comes back with 2. So let's take a look at this. Again, maximum 1 is the function being run, and let's look at that. Maximum 1. So here's maximum 1 with my list. I'm setting the maximum number to be minus 9999, which will make the first number that I loop through in this loop right here become the new maximum number. So what I'm saying is if the number is greater than the current maximum number, I'm going to reset my current maximum number. And that seems to be correct. But then look at this line right here, return max num1. This is right here a very classic mistake. I'm looping through my list right here, and at the end of the first loop, I'm returning. And when I return, I am out of here, I am done, no mas. But that's not what I want. I want to actually be able to loop through that entire list. And so to do that, this return needs to line up vertically with a 4. As it is now, this return will run after I loop through everything. Here, it's going to loop through just the first item, it's going to hit the return, and it's going to be quitting out of there. So again, that's not what I want. What I want is the return to happen after I loop through everything. Let's try it out. The maximum number is 19 as I expect. All right, the next one. Next one says first min equals to minimum 1. So I'm going to work with this minimum function here. and it's going to find the minimum number in the list. And the minimum number in the list is -1. But it prints out instead 999,999. That's wrong, so let's look at it. So I have the function defined here. I'm setting the first minimum number to be very, 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 very high, so that my first number that I loop through will be under that and will be the current minimum number. And that seems correct. I'm going to loop through the list. I'm going to check to see if the number that I'm on is greater than the minimum number, and if so, it's going to reset the minimum number. Then I return after I loop through everything. You might recognize this from the previous one. All right, so this is another Boolean expression error. If the number is greater than the min number, I'm going to reset my min number. No, if the number is less than the minimum number, I'm going to reset my minimum number. So I think that's where the error is, and yes, my logical error 4 is fixed. And over here, it prints out the minimum number as -1. All right, let's look at the last one. Again, it's a maximum. It's a maximum function here. It says second max is equal to maximum 2. We're looking for a maximum function. And it's just another maximum function error. So let's take a look. Here's my maximum 2 function right here. It says to change one line. I'm going to set my maximum number to be something very, very, very small. I'm going to loop over the items in the list. If the current number is greater than my maximum number, I'm going to reset my number to be equal to the max. And then I'll return the max. So this one right here has the return in the correct place. If you remember from the first one, we want to return after we're done looping. So that's not the error. And if you look closely at the Boolean looks good. If the number is greater than my current max number, that's what I want. But this is wrong right here. This is actually reversed. What I want to do is set my max number is equal to my current number and not the other way around. So let's try to run this again. It returns 19 as I expect, and all my errors are fixed. Alright, so that's pretty much it. Hope that was useful to you. And if it was, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.